CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Today we are meeting with Ross Fergerson. He is facilities manager at Sargent Aerospace Defense. They are part of RBC Bearings, and we're going to talk about their journey into selecting Limble, what has happened since. It's going to be fun. Ross, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, I appreciate you making the time. We worked on it for a little while, and the timing couldn't be better. Limble just launched a new logo. They've got a brand new mobile app. I'm sure you've been in there using that kind of stuff, and I'm a lot less focused on products and features and more about the maintenance management and the journey. But I want to understand a little bit about how you ended up with Limble as your CMMS product, because that's not always an easy process when you're out here looking around for solutions, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them. Some advertise, spend all the money, and they show up first on your Google list, or you might talk to a colleague. How did it happen in the first place? And what I'm really after is not only how did you find them, but what was the engagement process like? What really made the difference for you knowing, you know what, these are my guys. They're going to help me. This is the right system.
Certainly. Yeah. So when I started at Sargent about 3.5 years ago, I was actually a software engineer, not quite in the maintenance realm yet. And my first project was to replace our existing maintenance software. The one that we had prior to Limble was old. It was unsupported, so you would go to the website for support and didn't even exist. And it was, old, slow, and it took forever to get reports. It was just very hard to use. So like I said, my first project starting at Sargent was, hey, find us a new system. So I took about 3 months and just did a bunch of market research, just tried to find what solutions are out there. What are the differences between the solutions? And so I took about 12 initially, and I went through demos, trials, looked at, research into all the different, features and everything that they had to offer, and just slowly kept dwindling the list until I got to about a top 5. Slowly, shrinking the list, and I got to about top 5. And then from 5 went down to 3. And when I went down to 3, they were all 3 really good systems. There wasn't much kind of separating them. So we really had to find, some certain specific features to kind of use that to basically pick one over the other. So throughout the entire time, though, Limble was always one of my top considerations. They did a really good job right off the bat, just making sure you were supported through this whole process. So any questions I had regarding the product initially, they were really responsive to. They were great about getting me a trial to use, for my own use, and just make sure, hey, these are the use cases I have at my company. How can I use those in your software? And just throughout the experience, I guess I should say, they were always, very supportive right there, along the way, to make sure that anything I wanted to test or try on their system, I was supported in. And eventually they made the cut and were my decision for what CMMS we were going to go with.
Yeah. And that's a relief too, right? Because you're looking through so many systems and you're hearing a lot of the same things. You're trying to figure out, well, who's really all about this, who actually understands me. And I think a lot of times it comes down to that. It's nice to have a system that's great, looks good, flows, functions well, and that they're supporting you during the trial. And it gives you a sense of what they're going to do when you become a client. But the other thing is, when I talk about that decision, all right, we're going with this. Now we're going to move forward. That's an exciting time if only you can turn that corner and actually redouble your efforts and say, okay, we got our system. Now we have to actually deploy it. And I'm curious because I know a little bit about the success you've had on the platform, and I want you to share that. But one of the biggest challenges we see out there in the world of maintenance management, asset management, all of it, is adoption and how you really turn that corner after making your selection and getting a deployment where people are bought in. How did you get your front line, or was it your front line that said, hey, we want and need something better, and they were all about it? Was there anything in particular that was kind of like a magic moment where you're like, all right, I know this team likes this system too, so now we're confident? Was there any of that influenced your decision? And I also want you to fast forward and talk about how the deployment really worked for you internally.
Certainly. Yeah. So I'll say the kind of user acceptance came much later than the actual implementation of the system. So it was a big project, right? Like you said, we made the decision, we have our solution, now what, right? So for me, that looked like exporting, 10 plus years of historical data from our old system, cleaning it up so that we can import it into Limble and not lose any of that. But when you look at a CMMS, there's so many features to it, right? You have your asset list, your PM templates, your work request portal, to make sure people can request work, parts, vendors. There's so much that kind of encapsulates a system like that. So for me, I just tried to come up with a phased approach, essentially, where I would start with what I've kind of been saying is the meat and potatoes of the system, and then kind of gradually build value in the system and grow different aspects of it, rather than try to take it all in one big approach and say, all right, we have this, let's get everything perfect and then implement it.
I laughed because sure, in a perfect world, we would love to do that. And there are situations that we've all heard about or seen that may have gone that way, but most of the time you can't do that, because you're never going to get to that point where you're like, yep, it's done, it is perfect. It's pretty typical if you've got a system that has that approach where you can, hey, let's hit the big rocks, let's get the main things in here, and then we can kind of backfill that. It's risky because a lot of companies won't do that backfilling later, like 3 months
Right.
down the line. All right, now we're going to put in more of these assets, now we're going to refine some of these procedures and all that. Did you have resistance once you got through the initial implementation and started deploying to your teams, right? The frontline workforce. Did you have any resistance to getting on the system? And if so, how did you solve that? And if you didn't, what were some of the favorite things your team had to say about or were really into when it comes to this implementation of a new working system?
Sure. Yeah, certainly face some reluctance of a new system. With the team that I joined here, they were using their old software for 10 plus years. So it was a system that they knew, they utilized quite a bit. And, despite it being slow, unsupported, it was comfortable for them, right? So, and, that phased approach, a lot of that consideration came from the end user as well, right? And I kind of got a glimpse of that as I was rolling out the program. One of the things I tried to do was give them tablets so that they didn't have to print off their work orders. Limble has a great app, like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. And so what I wanted to do was empower them to not have to print off their work orders every time. They could just take their tablet, complete their work within the system on the mobile app, and then just keep going. They don't have to come back and close a job out, print off the new one, kind of keep them moving. And when I remember when I handed them the tablets, a lot of them were kind of like shocked a little bit, right? And I feel like I didn't want to hand them, that kind of gave me a sense of, hey, let's not push too much, to them at once, right? I feel like a lot of the success in the user adoption came from, hey, we're just going to show you little pieces of the system bit by bit, have you get comfortable with it. And then as you gain more, comfort in the system and experience in it, then we can roll out more features and get you, really up and running with it.
Yeah, the training wheels approach,
Exactly.
let's start easy, dip our toes in, get familiar with some of the basics, and little by little you just build on that, and then it helps you. Does that kind of help you identify who's ultra resistant, and then you can kind of help them out separately to kind of warm up to it?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, you have, and traditionally a group that isn't always the most tech savvy. So, you're handing them new technology, a new system, and you're saying, hey, go ahead and use it, but yeah, like you mentioned, some people were a little more hesitant than others. And so, you work to get the people on that are a little more willing, and then you kind of specialize a little more in those that haven't quite fully, bought into it yet. But, what we say at Sargent is make the challenging a reality. And that was something that I knew I could get these guys if I just showed them, hey, this is how great the system is. This is how much easier it is to use than the last system. These are all the benefits you can get from it. I think once I kind of cracked through and really broke through in that sense, they were all a lot more willing to kind of jump on and make more of an effort to learn and use it.
Yeah, and that puts you in this position now to, through this, well, data-driven maintenance transformation, because I know there was a comprehensive case study done on that, and so now we fast forward a little bit more where you've got the adoption, you've got good data, contextual data, some standardization, or maybe a lot of standardization around what we call things. What were some of the things that you've seen over this time period and right now today that are making a difference for not just the frontline workforce, but what about for mid-level and upper management, maybe all the way to the boardroom, because you're now thriving on the platform. You're past those adoption phases, and now it's more about let's make sure we keep doing what works. How is that impacting the organization at those different levels? So, what kind of great feedback do you get from the floor, and what kind of great feedback do you get from mid-level and upper management as it relates to how this is connecting your maintenance processes to the business?
Certainly. Yeah, there's two things that come to mind when you mention that. Certainly for upper management, and for managers and leadership, the transparency is probably the biggest benefit from this. With our old system, I used to tell people that I'd see managers come in the morning, generate a report on the system, and they would get up from the computer and go grab a cup of coffee because it took that long for the system to generate and compile this report for them that they would then print out and take to their meetings. Um, Whereas now with this system, I have dashboards that I can send to my managers, every Friday or every, whatever day of the week. And it gives them a lot more transparency into not only the metrics, hey, this is how much downtime we have, this is how much uptime we have, this is how many, hours worked we have, time spent, things like that. It's also just a transparency on what we do. I feel like a lot of the times, maintenance work can be, um, you know, somewhat of a thankless job sometimes, and it's not always kind of brought into the spotlight for everybody to see. So it was kind of a great tool to show leadership and say, hey, this is what this team does for you, and these are the efforts that we make to ensure that production's still going, that machines are up, and that we play a vital part in this whole kind of system of manufacturing, and building parts for our customers. So um, I think for that side of it was transparency. And then funny enough for, kind of everybody else, especially the internal customers, like our employees, was
Mm-hmm.
morale. With how slow and underutilized the old system was, I feel like there was this erosion of trust in it where, somebody would have, an issue to report. They wouldn't even use the system at that point just because it was so cumbersome to use and it was slow that they just, reverted to shoulder taps, right? They said, hey, instead of trying to put this in the system, I'm just going to go let some so and so know, and they'll go ahead and fix it for me. And with this system, it's so much easier to request work. It takes seconds now, So I get a lot of feedback from the customers, our employees over at Sargent and RBC that they hear, hey, you're the guy that set up Limble, and it's like, oh man, thank you so much. Like they're so appreciative because they can actually utilize the system properly and they're being seen and heard, and it's like, yeah, I submitted something and they responded to it and they actually fixed it. And, I think it means a lot for them to kind of get that,
It's the
that.
it's those little things that add up and they make a difference. And a lot of people will maybe kind of snicker and say, that's a bunch of hogwash, but it's a real thing because that's what's on the other side of being organized, getting the right data about the right machines from the right team that is bought in, because this is making an impact for me. I'm not getting stuck. It doesn't take me 5 minutes to create or close out a work order. Not to
Right.
mention, if the old system was clunky and junky and just outdated, it happens. It just happens, right?
It does.
Let's not throw mud, but you got to get away from that because it will strip away, eat away little by little those little annoyances. Your team is just going to tune out. And this is another way to kind of, I want to say maintain or improve culture, but I don't think the technology does it. I think it's the people that do it as they become more cohesive, but the technology plays a role in that. And I think ultimately, if you're getting this opportunity for front team buy-in that's making an impact for them, making their lives easier, and all the way up to the boardroom, they're starting to see the real contributions that maintenance makes to your ability to manufacture. It's everything.
Right.
Maintenance is everything, but you start to do that thing we've all been talking about for years and years. Even longer than you've been in the business, we're all talking about what's possible and if we can get people kind of moving in the right direction. And the software plays a role, but it really comes down to the people in the process. So it's good that you had that kind of relationship and buy-in. Where are we at now? When I say we, I'm talking about you and your team when it comes to things like seeing a repetitive problem, a recurring problem, starting to dive into metrics behind a particular piece of equipment. Are there real big discoveries now that you've been using the system for a while? By the way, how long has it been?
We're coming up on 3 years of use.
Okay.
So, yeah, well-established system at this point. And Yeah, so where we are now, we are growing the system. So I have helped implement Limble at a few other RBC sites within the company, a few others that are, jumping on as well, kind of had similar pain points with their systems and, saw success with where we're at. So got it, curious and interested and decided to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it has truly been a huge gain for our maintenance program too, just because this system and having that kind of defined process of completing maintenance, it does allow you to kind of find deficiencies in some of those maintenance tasks that you're doing. Are we doing this too often? Are we doing it not often enough? And I think the system has helped with that because we can annotate that, and that transfer of knowledge is much more seamless now, where it's like, hey, Joe fixed that machine last time. Go ask him if it had that issue back then. It's we can find deficiencies. Limble is flexible enough to allow us to, kind of tweak the system and ensure that we can kind of fit it to what our needs are. And
Is that
then
is that
overall,
is that based on the workflows that are specific to how you operate? It has enough flexibility for you to match your workflow. You didn't have to really change that.
no, yeah, it's very, very nice. And the great thing too is Limble support has been really helpful with that as well, to where if I don't know how to do something, there's a chat feature right there, and I can just go in and ask them and pretty much get answers right on, right at your fingertips. You don't have to wait for, oh, they're closed now, I'll call tomorrow morning, or oh, I'll send an email and maybe they'll respond to me tomorrow. You get answers right away. And so um, yeah, that's been a huge help for us as well.
Train, pardon me. Training is everything.
Hmm.
Once you've moved forward. I mean, it sounds silly, but if you bought a car and you didn't know how to drive it, what good is it going to be, right? Looks great in the
100%.
driveway. Um,
Totally.
and I know that's simplistic, but it kind of makes sense to everyone. And I'm always fascinated when people, y- you know, love their system for all these different reasons. There's lots of similarities, but there's nuance along the way. And I'm wondering what you would say the biggest the biggest impacts have been so far, not just for you and your team, but getting back to the organization where we know that implementing and utilizing Limble made this impact, made this impact, made this impact? Are there any specifics you're allowed to share?
Probably not, unfortunately.
Well, and that the reason I asked if you're allowed to is because we're talking aerospace and defense here, and people have to understand there are a lot of things that we would love to talk about, but if we're recording, we just can't.
Right.
And I think it's fair to say that the impacts are there because number one, you've been there 3 years. Number two, there wouldn't have been a comprehensive case study done, which people, by the way, if you want to get your hands on that, you would go to Limble's website, and there's a way you can fill out this form and get access to that case study. And the reason I think it's important to get those pieces of information and insights that we're allowed to go out to the public is it gives you a little more confidence about how somebody is doing this. How is somebody selecting, implementing, and actually thriving on a CMMS? You've already talked about how a lot of times, I tell people this all the time, the software is the software. It's a tool. You're going to use it the right way. A lot of times it's the wrong way. It's going to come down to how your people adopt, but with the support and the guidance of the company providing it. That, I think, is the most important thing. Who's behind the software? And they've made a lot of recent innovations at Limble, especially with the new mobile application. So I wanted to ask you, because you've seen firsthand now the difference between the current one and the old one. And I think what I've heard is that it's more dynamic, it's faster, it doesn't hang up, all those different things. Have you seen an even further increase of adoption by your frontline team as it relates to the new app?
Certainly. Yes. Yeah. I think the new app is a lot more intuitive. The old app was great, and I used the old app a lot. But yeah, the new app, I think when they developed the older version of it, it was very focused on the perspective of the technician and the people completing the work.
Yeah.
So I feel like the new app just kind of takes that not only a step further, but it also expands a little of those capabilities as well, to where like I can go on and look at my dashboards even and things like that.
From
But
wherever you are makes a huge difference because you don't stay there in your office all that often, right? You're getting out there, so you
Mhm.
can just look. I think that's great.
Right. Yeah. And when we were first implementing Limble, I know this isn't quite on the topic of the new app, but when we were first implementing Limble, I remember our maintenance manager was all the way in Wisconsin, doing some training, and we were getting work requests incoming. And he was able from Wisconsin to just go off his phone and send that one to Joe, send that one to Phil, send that one to Arthur. And, you're able to manage your team and your maintenance, throughout the facility from anywhere, from your phone. So it is just such a powerful tool in that aspect to where it keeps you on the go. It keeps you informed. You get the push notification. So if anything new came up, it's coming to you, right at your fingertips.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
You've
just seems like, yeah, they just took it a step further.
you've truly escaped that kind of legacy quagmire or the clunky and junky systems that they can no longer support. Look, sometimes that's the right decision for them as a company, but the poor clients, right? So it's great that you found, a product that not only works well for your team, but you have a real partnership with your provider in Limble, and that's kind of where the real advantages come up, when that's the kind of relationship that's not only being focused on but really nurtured the whole way through. that's
Right.
that's all it really comes down to, as long as the stuff works, right? The product itself. I want to switch gears a little bit
Sure.
and get you into what we call the fun question segment. That's just a fun way for us to kind of have some random questions. But before
Nice.
that, any advice that you would give to someone that's on this journey, and it doesn't have to be specific to the product, to the Limble product, but what would you say to someone that's trying to either fix, find, or replace their CMMS?
Yeah, I would just say that It's a daunting project at first, right? There's a lot that goes into, you know, completely, implementing a whole new system like this. So the way that I found most successful was to just take it piece by piece, chop at it, bit by bit. When I was implementing it, I kind of focused on different things at certain points. So initially it was bringing over the historical data, just making sure I could do that, and then importing that. And then once I did have the system ready to implement, I focused on the assets for, the assets and the work request portal and the PMs, just the meat and potatoes, kind of like I said. And then, I took it a step further where the next phase was, okay, now we'll explore parts, and now we'll explore adding our vendors in, and then we'll explore integrations with our ERP. And, hopefully down the line, we're going to, install sensors and start, really building our maintenance to be, predictive and conditional rather than just preventative. So, I would say it's a very big project, but if you just kind of take it piece by piece and break it down to be a little more digestible, I think that's one of the best keys to success in kind of undergoing a project like this.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because I want to get that from you. You're a client. You're someone that's there doing it. You're doing it every day, and that's an important thing for people to be reminded of, how you're going to approach this. And everybody's got slightly different approaches. They got similarities, but there's a little nuance. So I appreciate you sharing that. Time for the fun question segment, man. Are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready.
All right. First fun question. There's no wrong answers on any of this stuff. You just shoot from the hip, right?
Okay.
No wrong answers. First one. What is your favorite music?
Ooh, favorite music. I grew up listening to a lot of hip hop music, surprisingly. So, yeah, that's kind of what I lean towards mostly.
All
Is
right.
kind of the older, not I guess not older in my sense, like early 2000s kind of hip hop is where I really like to kind of jam to.
Good. Second fun question. What is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it does not have to be one that you play. It could be one you like to root for, a favorite team or a favorite sport to consume, I guess we would call it.
Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. I am a huge sports fan. My dad is from Wisconsin, so I was born into cheering for the Packers, the Brewers, and the Milwaukee Bucks are kind of my team. But it's March right now, so you got March Madness on, and I am a University of Arizona alumni. So right now, my whole focus is the March Madness tournament. Really rooting for the Wildcats, and I think this is our year. But either way, it's been a great season for them. So
Yeah,
looking forward to
that's
seeing how it
cool.
ends.
Yeah. No, it's everybody's talking about it, obviously. So good luck to your team.
Thank you.
Here's the big one. And again, I'll remind you, no wrong answers.
Okay.
What is your philosophy, perspective? Is it even a thing when it comes to this concept of work-life balance?
Yes. Yeah, that's arguably one of the biggest reasons I joined this company. One of the nice perks is our schedule for the moment is we do 4 9s and a 4, so we basically have a half day every Friday, and it's really sunny down here in Arizona, and I like to play golf, so it's great. Most Fridays I can work until about 11 a.m., get out in the morning, and then within the next hour, be on a tee box somewhere, swinging the sticks. So yeah, but I think work-life balance is great. And part of having a robust maintenance program, I think, kind of contributes to a good work-life balance, where you're not as reactive. You're not getting those calls on a Friday night or a Saturday on a weekend saying, hey, this went out, we need you here right away. It's, I can put the work in here while I'm here and then enjoy the times that I'm off, and doing the things that I like to do. So yeah, I think work-life balance is huge. And I think for, depending on where you're at in your career, it's a little more important, but I think especially for me, I like to work hard, but I like to play hard as well and enjoy my time off. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a very real and important thing.
Everybody's got a different perspective, experience, and approach. it kind of changes over life sometimes, and
Certainly.
that's why I like to ask those questions. And first of all, Ross, I want to thank you for being here with me and sharing part of your journey. And again, I want to remind everyone, if you want to read more about that, you can go to limble.com and find that case study, and you can fill out some information. They'll get that in your hands. And also, I would like to eventually do this again in the future if you're up for it, so that maybe when we hit year 4, we can find out how you're doing, because there's going to be a lot of changes over the next 12 months in the industry, how we do what we do. We got all these crazy pressures. We know what they are. You just turn on your news. It's all there. And I'll be curious about that. But I want to thank you, Ross Fergerson, for being here with me on CMMS Radio.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a blast talking to you. Thanks so much for inviting me on and let me join you today. And yeah, would love to chat in the future and do this again.
All right.
See where we're at maybe in a year or 2.
That'll work, man. I appreciate you, and thanks for sharing your Limble journey story so far.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Take care.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.